19. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geeknights. Tonight, what's wrong with Dungeons and Dragons?
Let's do this. If you recall, last week we told that we went to the amazing Millennium Game Store and purchased a whole mess of new board games.
For the first time in our entire lives, we went to the board gaming shop, and usually we'd either not buy anything or one of us would buy a game. Usually saying, I'm not buying the next one, it's all you. This time, we didn't hold back, and we bought everything that took our fancy at all.
No, there were plenty of things that took my fancy that I did not buy.
I bought every game that I have wanted that they had. Every game I physically saw that I had desired in the past, I bought.
We bought, let's see, a total of, I guess, 4.5 games, and Alex bought a 5th game. So we bought a lot of games, and this weekend we played all those games.
It felt really good.
What felt even better was, against all odds, every single one of those games was good. They were not bad games at all.
Yeah, I mean, the worst of the games, and I'm still not sure which one that is, but I got a few candidates, is still better than a lot of games out there by far, and is still playable.
Yeah, there are a lot of games that we own from way back that we just don't play anymore. And
Settlers.
I see these games being played for a very long time, and also providing much to talk about on the show.
Yes, I actually can't wait to talk about Gloria Mundi and the interesting experiment we ended up going through because I didn't pay attention when I went through the rules.
Good job. But yeah, we've talked about Gloria Mundi before, though, because we did play it once.
Well, yeah, but I'd like to do a whole show on it someday in the future.
We will.
Suffice to say, it was a good weekend.
Yeah. Also, we have talked for I don't know how many years, maybe 6 years, about setting up some sort of computerized database system to record who wins and loses in the board games we play.
Now, usually, whenever someone would propose this idea, it was always whoever had just won a bunch of board games recently. And they'd usually say something like, I don't want you people to forget that I'm the one in charge here. I'm the business.
You mean me? I'm always the business.
You mean me?
Yeah. Anyway, we had proposed this system in the past, and we had never implemented this system. Well, Board Game Geek actually implemented the system, and you can go and report board game sessions there, but we never actually bothered to do that either.
We kept saying we would. At one point, on the inside of one of my computer cases, I used to mark every time I won a game of air hockey against Scott, and that was the closest we ever got.
So, finally, Alex got off his horse and said, aha, and he made he didn't make, the perfect ultimate finished product.
Got off his horse? Wouldn't it be got on his horse and went and did something? You don't get off your horse to be, never mind.
High horse? I don't know.
It was not a high horse. Maybe a sawhorse.
Maybe.
Anyway,
I couldn't think of a better turn of phrase or idiom. So, he got off his ass and he made one. He didn't make it perfect.
Wait a minute.
What?
That works perfectly. Got off his ass, but an ass like a mule, kind of like a horse.
That's why getting off the horse works.
So anyway, it does. I concede the point.
So,
I'm not gonna let you finish.
God damn it. It's
hot out. If you listen to Dave and Joel lately, they like to talk about how hot it is. Luckily,
warm today.
Warm yesterday.
Even warmer today.
Luckily, I have the solution to the heat in my hands. My favorite summertime drink, lemonade and Southern Comfort.
Melonade.
Anyway.
We made it, and it works. We're not putting it on Board Game Geek. I guess maybe that could be in the future. And it doesn't have all the features we would like yet, but we've been keeping track of who wins, and Rim's not doing too well.
I did okay.
Okay.
Plus, I do point out that I did win the last game we played in a very closely run affair where Alex almost won, and you,
That was because you both had prior experience with the game, and I played it just fine.
Wait a minute. You were claiming my prior experience in a game where I denied having played it because I didn't think that I had until the last minute when I recognized one graphic on one of the cards on the board and said, maybe I did play this game.
Yeah, you said you definitely played it. Anyway, and you did.
Oh, I did, but I didn't realize it.
Regardless, because I was inexperienced and I was forced to go first.
Plus, I also won the broken game of Gloria Mundi.
Yes, I was forced to go first, and I made an incredibly horrible opening play, and my plays after that were just fine, but my opening play was so poor that it ruined my entire game, and that will not happen in the future, I can assure you.
Of course, the system we put in place fails to take into account my 80 to 85% victory rate at Carcassonne.
As well it should. All right. Let's make some news happen.
News, eh?
Yep. So, Rim, you like Guitar Heroes?
While I've only played probably an hour's worth of Guitar Heroes in my whole
You
life.
played more than an hour's worth of Guitar
Not
Heroes.
so much more.
A few hours.
I mean, if you count the time where I stand around with other people playing Guitar Heroes, waiting to play Guitar Heroes.
But
then
I'm just
yeah.
saying, playing one song takes almost like more than 5 minutes sometimes.
I've
depending
played
on the
less
song.
than 20 songs.
I don't think so.
I didn't play it as much as you guys did. Every time we were over at someone's house, I woke up late. Real late. And you guys were always playing.
Anyway.
Every time I went to a con, I end up not playing.
Anyway, everyone's talking about this rock band that they're making.
I don't know how I feel about it, but I'm excited.
Where everyone has, you get a bunch of different instruments going on. And today, the released were pictures of the rock band guitar. Now, I am not, some guitar fanboy or something, or a guitar geek, but I must say that I am aware that there is a company that produces guitars that is known as Fender, and there is a company that produces guitars known as Gibson. And I know that the guitars in Guitar Hero are Gibson guitars. And I must say that I prefer the way the Fender guitars look, just looking at them.
I think looks are the only thing we have to go on.
Yes, and Fender makes the Stratocaster and the Telecaster, and Gibson makes the Les Paul. And
Do you know the difference between a Telecaster and a Stratocaster?
they look slightly different. They sound slightly different, but they're electric, so I guess I would assume that if you plug it into some amp, then you could make them both sound the same with the electronics.
I hadn't heard both of those terms until I started listening to Meatloaf.
Yes. Anyway, in Guitar Hero, the guitars in the game, as well as the plastic guitar, are all Gibsons. In Rock Band, the guitar you are going to use is a Fender Stratocaster made of plastic.
Not too shabby.
And I gotta tell you, this picture of it, it looks pretty cool. But that's not the only difference. They have changed other things about this guitar. First of all, instead of putting the colors of the buttons on the surface of the guitar, on the surface of the buttons, they put them on the side of the buttons. So looking at the side of the guitar, you can see what color you're pushing. So you don't have to hold the guitar face up to see the colors, which is pretty good. The second thing they have done is they have added a second set of 5 buttons way down at the bottom of the neck.
Oh,
so
man.
you can do
Oh, man.
the meedlies as well as the squeedlies.
I don't know how I feel about that.
I want to know, how's that going to come into play in the game? I mean, is it just going to be for, your personal feelings? Like, here comes a squeedly part of the song, I'm going to go way down and play down there.
Or maybe, here's what I would do.
I would just have it say in the game, there would be some sort of visual cue that says, switch to the other half. Now switch back to the other half.
You might do something like that, but I'd say they both work, and they play the same notes. Just if you're playing on the squeedlies, it makes squeedlies. And if you're playing on the meadlies, it makes meadlies. And you can just kind of screw around.
Actually, I think maybe the ultimate solution is to have different play modes. Like the normal play mode, you're only going to use 3 buttons, and you could use either set, it doesn't matter. And yes, it would sound different if you used one or the other. But I think there should be an advanced play mode that says, use these, now use these, now use these. And also, if you use... I guess in the normal play mode, if you were to use the squeedlies at the right time, even though you weren't required to, that you would somehow get bonus points. I think that would be a good play mode.
Yeah.
But I do kind of feel that it really shouldn't matter which ones you use for another reason. That reason would be if you already own Guitar Hero guitars, you don't have to replace them all.
Are you sure you might not have to anyway?
That's what I'm wondering.
I imagine you will.
See, I'm really hoping that these guitars are backwards compatible and old guitars are forwards compatible.
Yes,
Otherwise,
the last thing I need is a collection of fake instruments to go next to all of the other things I own.
I know, it's like people already have enough, plastic instruments. And if they're doing this rock band, we're going to assume they're going to need drums of some sort.
Yeah, and then it's just going to go from there. They're
microphones.
going to make ska band. We're going to have these Wiimote trumpets coming out.
Yeah. We want to minimize the plastic musical equipment in the house. So make everything as compatible as possible. And if I'm looking at the picture here, and it is 5 buttons, green, red, yellow, blue, orange. So that's Guitar Hero right there. So it should be all right. But I definitely want to use that thing more than I want to use any of the existing Guitar Hero guitars, just because that's my personal flavor.
So in much more depressing news, the barbarians living over on the great old island of Albion have decided that they don't like free speech.
Well, they don't like a lot of freedom. I mean, they got those freaking security cameras all over the place.
Oh, yeah, like we don't in New York City.
And, it took them a lot longer to get rid of their kings than we did.
Their kings have been impotent for a long time. We kicked their ass 1776. We can kick them in Well, I guess we already did in 1996.
Yeah, there's a reason we did that.
Yeah. But no, it looks like Britain, for the first time in a decade, according to this article here on BBC, I guess that's where the news comes from in Albion. I don't know what the B stands for.
It should be ABC.
I realize we've gotten a lot of new listeners, so I'm just going to let you all know that we call Britain or Great Britain
or United Kingdom.
The United Kingdom or England or any of those places Albion, because that's the only word we could come up with that encompasses all that we mean without meaning things we don't expect.
Yeah, it's like if we just sit, like when we're talking about a subset of Albion, like if we're talking about just Scotland or just Wales, we can do that because we know what those are.
Yeah, but what's the difference between the United Kingdom and Great Britain and Britain and...
Yeah, if we try to just, say like UK and it was actually only England or something like that. I don't know. I could be wrong right now, already getting yelled at by someone over there.
Now, what I love
then we'll
is...
just get yelled at. So we say Albion to avoid being yelled at, and always, we'll never be wrong if we just say Albion every time.
Yeah, and you know what? Someday the Romans are coming back, and this business will be sorted out. Let my homies know who done it.
All right.
Sorry.
So the barbarians in Albion did what?
So,
Barbarians say what?
Manhunt 2 is a somewhat violent video game, and they decided that this video game is so abhorrent that it is banned from the island. Period.
Huh? That's anti-freedom.
To quote...
Is it fascist over there?
David Cook, director of the BBFC, I guess that should be the Albionic equivalent of the FCC. Manhunt 2 is distinguishable from recent high-end video games by its unremitting bleakness and callousness of tone. There is sustained and cumulative casual sadism. Ooh, I like that alliteration. Cumulative casual sadism in the way in which these killings are committed and encouraged in the game. The game is morally irresponsible.
It's a horror game.
Now
it's supposed to be like that.
How is this worse than, I don't know, reading a book about Jack the Ripper murdering people? Or, I don't know, reading a book about anything, the Bible.
I don't think we need to make an argument as to violent video games don't hurt people, because it's made 1,000 times, and we're right, and they're wrong, and that's the end of that story.
It bothers me that, it bothers me on one level that people treat video games differently, but then again, they used to treat music differently, rock and roll, then they blame hip-hop. It seems like people always want to have an excuse to blame for whenever their kids stray or when bad things happen. And currently, video games is that scapegoat. I mean, like, look at Hillary Clinton. She's running for president of the United States. And one of her platforms is, gotta stop those evil video games ruining our kids. And I know she's an intelligent woman, and she doesn't believe that, but I hope not.
I don't know. She might. I get the feeling that
But
she
a
might.
lot of politicians are on this boat because it's really easy to say that video games cause the problems and that by getting rid of them, you'll solve the problems. Because we all know that when they stopped letting people play rock and roll, there was no more crime. Now, the reason this really bothers me isn't so much that they banned it, because whatever, the people on the island of Albion can do whatever they want.
I think what it's time to do is get a whole bunch of copies and start shipping them over there in disguise.
Here's the part that bothers me, the second half of the article. Quote, the original Manhunt game caused huge controversy and was blamed for the murder of Stefan Pakira.
Did the game just jump out and stab him?
Apparently, the kid was walking through the Albionic equivalent of Walmart, so Allmart, or Ye Old Mart, and the cartridge just jumped out and stabbed him in the eye.
It's a cartridge game? No wonder it hurt him.
No, what actually happened was he was randomly stabbed and beaten to death by a mugger in some Albionic town in 2004. and his parents believed that the killer was inspired by the game. I don't think there was any evidence of that whatsoever. But a lot of people jumped on this bandwagon, and apparently the parents have been campaigning against violent video games since.
But I mean, at least some of the other people who blame violent video games, like the people who blame violent video games on Columbine, at least those guys played Doom. They did.
Little.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, they probably were still crazy fuckers, and they would have killed him even if they hadn't had Doom. They would have killed him if it was the year 1832 and we had schools like that, and those kids were the same kids they were. It was they're nuts. But at least there were video games there. Here, was there any evidence at all?
I mean, I don't know. This is just in the article. It seems to be the BBC likes to a lot always have two related stories. Like, they always have the first half of the story, and then the second half of the story is related, but only kind of. And there's not enough info, and I didn't feel like looking it up.
Here's the other thing, is that this game apparently got an adults-only rating in the U.S., right? And the people who made the game were, like, so upset. They were like, oh, we thought we were making it a mature game. Manhunt 1 was an M game, and we made it in line with Manhunt 1, and we're very sad we got adults only. And I'm like, wait, what? Why are you sad? It's an adults only game. Now it's like, ooh, everyone wants it.
Well, the last game that they did
sort of like
to,
how South Park had the MA, and everyone wanted to watch it.
The last game that they did this to was Carmageddon in 1997, a decade ago. And apparently that was
I played the demo of Carmageddon. You know what? It's not really adults only. All you do is drive a car around and these little pixelated people go squish.
Well, they apparently overturned that on appeal, and the Albions got to play this game.
Uh-huh.
So we'll see what happens if this gets appealed or whatever, but
I think the problem here is that the games industry itself seems to be like, they don't have they have some balls. They're definitely on the right side. They're on our side saying, video games don't hurt people, et cetera, et cetera. They don't cause violence. You're all just a bunch of crazies. But they also don't have the balls to say, yeah, we believe this so much that we're, okay, rate the game adults only. We're still going to sell it in the goddamn stores. What are you going to do about it? Yeah, what are you going to do?
Well, apparently the Albions will just ban the game entirely.
No, they can do that. But in the U.S., if GameStop and EB and Amazon had balls, they could still sell this game. Adults only doesn't mean illegal to sell.
Yeah, but ban does.
Yeah, it does.
I don't know the exact detail. I don't know what kind of time you'll do if you illegally import this horribly seditious material into Albion.
I wonder, should we do some smuggling action?
That would be awesome.
All Han Solo, bringing a whole bunch of, burned DVDs into Albion.
We got our friends over at Movies You Should See. We should just mail them a crate of the game and a note that says, do what you will.
Well, we'd have to somehow, disguise the game. We'd take the DVD cases and disguise them as, some other sort of, Region 2 DVDs.
Oh, well, the perfect
Region
disguise. 3. What we do is we mail to everyone in Britain one of those Guy Fawkes masks, and inside of it is this game.
Oh, obviously.
Obviously. Things of the day. Now, originally, Scott had a thing of the day, and I had a thing of the day, and they were kind of related. It was like a theme day. Not quite a theme week, but a theme day. And Scott then discovered something so cool that there's no way we could pass up talking about it.
Well, I discovered it this morning, but I remembered it as I browsed the internet.
Yeah, but suffice to say, we couldn't push it off another week because there was a chance we'd forget. So we'll let Scott go last, but the original things of the day, we really like a band you might have heard of. They're called Daft Punk.
They're two French guys who remain anonymous, but I think you can see pictures of their faces on the internet. But they usually wear, robot masks, and they make awesome musics.
Their music is some of my favorite kind of music. And one of their songs is fairly iconic to us, partly because at RIT, someone, I'm not sure who, I think it was Scott Johnson, but I don't actually remember offhand, showed us this Flash video made to this music. And the Flash video is the River City Ransom guy, the Narc guy.
Ryan.
Ryan. The Narc guy, the blue one, Barbie, and Boy from A Boy and His Blob. Not the Blob, just Boy.
Yeah, the Blob does not appear.
Now, this video was one of those things, much like the leak spin, that ended up consuming all of us for about a week. And to this day, I really like this video. I think this is the kind of clever shit that I like to see on the internet.
Yeah, this is definitely a classic thing of the day. I'm pretty sure it's not been a thing of the day before.
Even if it hasn't, I figure you gotta see this. This is part of front row crew culture. This is from that old era before YouTube, when people would go to Flash websites and watch animations that were usually pretty piss poor. Something like this was amazing back then.
Yeah, it was good stuff. And
Well,
you need to see it.
we only thought to do this because we were reminded by my actual thing of the day, which is on Dig right now. And I saw it and I clicked on it only because I thought it was going to be one of those horribly lame things, and if anything, I was going to make fun of it on the show. It's the song, and there's someone's hands that looks like a girl's hands. And it's called like the Daft Punk hand job, whatever. And the hands just kind of stand there. The camera's just zoomed in on them. And she kind of dances with her hands to the song. And it's kind of cute, but it's also kind of lame. And you wonder what's going on. All I want to say, and I'm not going to say more, is keep watching until you realize why it's awesome. Just keep playing.
And if you know how the song goes, and you will if you watch the first Flash video first before you watch this YouTube, you will be able to figure out where it's going, and it goes all the way.
Scott, when we were watching it, when I showed it to Scott, he pretty much said, "Is she gonna do the?" And then she did. It was perfect.
Yep.
And I got a lot of respect for this because it's quite a bit more than I expected.
All right. This thing today is so cool. I didn't even my brain can comprehend it because it's sort of like a bunch of pieces that were put together, and I could have eventually figured out, hey, this could be possible, but I didn't think that it was done, and apparently it was done many times.
Yeah, I mean, the real thing is that I know about the two components that make up Scott's thing of the day. I knew about the one thing, and I knew about the other thing. But the idea that someone had combined them and done something this awesome is still a little bit staggering to me.
Yeah, and the fact that it was done so long ago, yet not discovered by the internets until just now, at least discovered widely on the internets until just now, is also amazing.
God, we need internet archaeologists to find things of the day for us.
Yeah, we do. All right, so whether you know it or not, back in the day, before we had magnetic media like floppy disks, or we had optical media like CD-ROMs, or anything like that, computers used, a lot of them, at least personal computers. Well, I mean, think about it. The really big computers that, the big old mainframes, they used like 2 reels of tape, right? They would go from reel to reel. And then eventually, when you bought a personal computer, instead of having a big reel of tape, you had a little cassette tape, the same kind you would put in your stereo. And if you ever used a dial-up modem, you hear those noises it makes? Well, if you took a tape with digital data on it and put it in a cassette player, it would sound like a modem or a fax machine or whatever, because that's what those things do, is they send digital data over an analog phone line, and an analog phone line, it's noise, and you can hear it. So, early PCs used cassette tapes to store data. Regardless of that, my dad has a lot of vinyl records, because he lived in a time when vinyl records were the shit, and he had a turntable, and he liked music, and he's got a lot of vinyl records. And as a kid, I listened to many of those vinyl records on my Big Bird turntable, which was later replaced with a non-Sesame Street turntable. And one of the vinyl records I enjoyed listening to, in perhaps my early preteen, teenage years, was a Monty Python album, which contained the audio of many Monty Python sketches without the video, which doesn't make sense now that you can buy all of it on DVD, but it made sense in the 70s when VHS did not exist. So, on one of these Monty Python albums, the vinyl record, there was a secret track. The way it worked, if you know how a record works, is you have this vinyl disc with grooves, and the needle goes in the grooves, and the groove is a big spiral. So when you spin the record around, the needle goes around the entire groove, getting closer and closer to the middle of the record until eventually the entire record is played. And in the groove are bumps, which bump the needle around, and when the needle is moved around, it makes noise. That's why when you put your finger on like a needle on a record player, you can hear, scratch it, and it makes noise. That's why when you move a record back and forth, it goes, wicka, 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 right? So, someone had the genius idea on this Monty Python album of making a groove in the grooves. If you were really careful and you had a really pointy record needle...
It was practically impossible.
I was never able to do it. You put this needle between the tracks, so there's a groove going around the record, and then there's a second smaller groove that is in between the normal groove. And if you balance the needle on this second, smaller hidden groove, there would be more data on the record than normally there would be. There was hidden audio, right? Apparently, back in the day, on certain albums, people put a hidden groove on a record, and in that hidden groove, they put digital data. And if you put your needle on that hidden groove and played it, and had a tape player, a tape recorder, and recorded that hidden digital data on the vinyl record to a cassette tape, and then if you put that cassette tape in your Sinclair Spectrum personal computer, you would get a video game.
That is so hot.
It's unbelievably hot. And on this website here, they've got screenshots, and I think you can even play one of the games online in like a little Sinclair emulating thing. And one of them's like a text adventure with low-resolution girls on the beach, and another one is like flying trains and all sorts of weird stuff. There's one.
I don't care if it's Custer's Revenge. The concept is just so cool.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what the hell game this is. Holy crap, there were video games that people made. Look, this one says, like, Hail Satan, lick his cloven hoof. Oh, and there's the basic code, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on here.
Check this business out. They let their homies know who done it.
This is crazy-ass business, and it's kind of sad that since our technology now is just completely digital in every way, that fun stuff like this doesn't happen anymore. We don't, we're not forced to do crazy hacks like this, and the hacks we do are, most of them are far less interesting.
Well, we're seeing that in video games anyway. I mean, even back then when they were digital, video games were still a mystery. Like, you'd search.
Yeah, you'd go to the Minus World in Mario 1.
And it was amazing, and you couldn't understand why it was there. And you'd explore the game, like in Castlevania, I once got on top of one of the castles where you shouldn't be, and there's all this water, and it was scary up there, and I remember this feeling of awe as a kid when I got into areas I shouldn't have gone. It was this land of mystery, and now...
Yeah, like Metroid with all its crazy wall
or
jumping.
you hear, like, I heard there's if you walk back and forth in front of the tower of whatever 1,000 times and then fight a dinosaur, General Leo will join your party. Now I can just dump the ROM and see clearly that there's no code for that.
Yes. And you know why everything happens? It's total demystification, And now, not only is the Minus World not a mystery in Mario 1, but also we can just make mods for games. And it's the end. But
we can make our own games.
Yeah, but this is pretty awesome right here. Check it out.
So, we haven't talked about role-playing games in a while, and we figured it was about time to bring it back up. And I was also reminded, even before, when our friend Ken was arguing with us about World of Warcraft, and we haven't actually gotten a chance to respond in detail to that yet, but one of the points he made was that he basically said that we shouldn't impinge upon the awesomeness that is Dungeons & Dragons. And we're huge fans of role-playing. We've played D&D a lot in our lives, and we continue to play. We have a campaign with much of the front row crew that runs once a month. That's the only time we have. But, I mean, we played all through college. I played all through high school and middle school.
I played it a lot in summer camp and such.
And despite all that, I'm going to come straight out and say it. Dungeons & Dragons is, all things considered, a pretty piss-poor system of role-playing, and I rather dislike it.
Yeah, for a game of role-playing, tabletop role-playing, where your goal is to play roles, Dungeons & Dragons is not so great. It has its benefits and its upsides, but for the most part, you can do a lot better, very easily.
So,
I mean, I'm not even talking like go all out and do Burning Wheel. There are many other systems that are better than Dungeons & Dragons that no one plays.
Now, I don't really want to get into all the other systems we're trying or the systems that are out there or any of that. We've talked about them before. If you're interested in alternative systems, check out an old show we did where we interviewed Luke Crane, the creator of Burning Wheel. Yep. That man is a role-playing genius, and I respect his opinion very highly.
Anyway, the reasons why Dungeons & Dragons is not so hot as a role-playing system go all the way back to when it was created by Gary Gygax in the 70s.
Yeah, there were other people involved, but you know what? We're not going to talk about the history in terms of, this man did this and this man did this, because it's incredibly boring.
Yes, but basically, there's a man named Gary Gygax, and he is credited with creating Dungeons & Dragons.
He's kind of scary, too.
Yeah, he's a scary gamer guy.
But at the same time, I got some respect for him.
Yeah, he's a famous geek person. Yeah. You should know who he is.
You should. He's pretty recognizable.
It's a name you should know.
He's pretty recognizable.
Plus, his name is Gygax. Think about that. What coincidence. A guy named Gygax is it's a g.
God,
right? Ended up making Dungeons & Dragons. But anyway, he he basically, was a fan of the miniature war games like Chainmail and other such games. Games like Warhammer. You have miniatures and you move them around a map and they fight, right? And from that, he spawned the first edition Dungeons and Dragons, which, while, it had the role-playing capacity that, where you can pretend to be whoever you are, for the most part, it was a game of walk around the dungeon, hit the monster, collect the treasure, search for traps. You basically play it a lot the way you play Hero Quest, only more complicated.
Yeah, the game was basically just a set of rules for combat and dungeon exploration. And if you roleplayed beyond that, it was entirely your prerogative.
Yeah, I mean, the original Dungeons & Dragons was so tied into the concept of dungeon crawling that there wasn't experience points. It was when you get to the next level of the dungeon, you get a level. That's how it was. It was that crazy. Like NetHack, where it has levels of the dungeon, and you go down one level. Oh, stairs! Let's go down the stairs real quick.
Yeah, always wanted to go down, never wanted to go up.
Yeah, because as soon as you went down, you got more powerful, and the monsters got more powerful, and you got closer to the end. So,
Fast forward
to 2nd edition and 3rd edition. Dungeons & Dragons changed quite a bit between 1st edition and now, I guess, 3.5 edition and a potential upcoming 4th
Yeah,
edition.
because I'm buying 4th edition.
Not. But,
Dude, I didn't buy 3.5 edition until I had to because my player's handbook fell apart.
yes. But they did change Dungeons & Dragons quite a bit from its 1st edition roots as a simple dungeon crawler. And they added all sorts of rules to do this and rules to do that, and they expanded it quite a bit. And there's a lot more to help you do role-playing, and there's a lot more to help you do all sorts of things, and role-playing is definitely more feasible, and a lot more scenarios besides just crawling down a dungeon and killing all the monsters are possible and encouraged. However, many remnants of the original tabletop miniatures war game remain, and actually a lot of them have been brought back somewhat, especially in the more recent versions.
So thus, what's wrong with D&D today? Because I will say that, and I used to talk about this quite a bit, especially back at RIT, when, 3rd edition came out just about before we went to college. So, I played it a little bit. We converted characters in it and all that. But I remember griping a lot about the things I didn't like in 3rd edition and how I thought 2nd edition was a superior role-playing system. And that was really partly due to the fact that I didn't know much about all the alternatives out there. So I'd always complain, yeah, 2nd ed handled this better, 2nd ed handled this better. And I guess now that I'm older and wiser and more well-informed, I've realized that 2nd edition didn't really handle things better. It was just that 2nd edition had a lot of gaps in the rules where the dungeon master and the players were forced to just kind of go with it and make something up or handle it somehow. A lot of it was very subjective. And as a result, it encouraged a lot of creative play and a lot of role-playing. 3rd edition, they fixed that because they got rid of a lot of the complicated, stupid rules like THAC0. Not that I still can't calculate a THAC0 like that, and not that
I can't.
THAC0 was... Well, you didn't play a lot of 2nd ed, did you?
I played it maybe 10 times.
Yeah, I've still played more 2nd ed than I have 3rd ed.
Oh, no.
That's kind of scary.
It's very scary.
When I really think about it. Yeah. And I used... Before that, I played Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, you don't want to play. I have that, but you don't want to play it.
Yeah, I had the rules cyclopedia that I spilled Dr. Pepper on once, and I almost cried.
How
when I
about
was
the
a
3
kid.
boxes at the Goodwill? The red, the blue, and the whatever?
Oh, I had well
The
after
green.
that. I had just Dungeons and Dragons, the rules cyclopedia.
Yeah.
And then I bought Advanced Dungeons and Dragons because Advanced, I'm older now, I can take it. But yeah, so it seems like everything that I liked about 2nd edition really just had to do with the fact that 2nd edition was so convoluted and hacked together and full of gaps that within those gaps, I had done all the things that superior role-playing systems do as part of the rules.
Yes, I mean, it wasn't really... It's not really an aspect of 2nd edition to have good role-playing. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of 2nd edition play is not with the high-quality role-playing action. It's up to the players to fill it in. So if you're playing with role players and you play 2nd edition, you're going to fill in the gaps with good role-playing. But if you play 2nd edition with normal guys, just people who played 1st edition, they're going to do the dungeon crawl, just as always.
Now,
the system doesn't help you out.
3rd edition, they fixed that by fixing all the rules and making everything very calculated and precise and accounted for and balanced. And as a result, you lost all those gaps. Wherein, look at a combat example. In 2nd edition, maybe you're in combat. It's your turn to fight. You might say something instead of just, I attack the ogre to the left. I try to jump up and blah, 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 and do something crazy. And the DM, there's no rule for that. And the DM would usually say, make 2 dex checks. And if you passed them both, you'd say, all right, roll for damage. It worked. Or, now you fell on your ass. Or something fun like that. In 3rd ed, there's usually rules for what you tried to do. And it's really difficult to just say, I try to do X, because that doesn't fit into the system of, partial action, move action, full action, all the things you can do on a turn in combat.
Yeah, they've basically got a rule covered for almost anything you would want to do. And even though you could potentially, play it fast and loose and deviate from those rules, it is usually to your detriment to deviate from the rules.
Yep.
And following the rules in the book and doing what they say and selecting your options from among the words in the player's handbook is the way to get the best, results, I guess. The most desirable results for your character in terms of beating up bad guys.
And the other thing is that despite all that, all the things they added to make the game more good, if you look at what it takes to make a character in D&D, or what you put into it, there's no role-playing at all inherent. If you make a character, 80% of what you do is setting up the character's combat ability, 10% is figuring out all the numbers, and then maybe you write a little bit of backstory, or
But it doesn't. This is the thing: is any sort of backstory or anything else you do is completely outside of the role-playing system.
Yep, there's no color in the game. Any skill you take is a appraisal. I get to appraise the rings that we find. Or diplomacy. I get to smooth talk the dragon. Or bluff. I get to lie to people. Mm-hmm. There's no just, I have a stumpy leg and I'm ugly.
Yep. Well, some people will make the argument that, hey, I don't want any of the role-playing in the system. The system doesn't need to have any role-playing in it. I can just role-play on my own, and I just need the system to figure out, when things happen and what people are able to do and what they're not able to do, et cetera, et cetera. As sort of, we always talk about you need the restriction on your creativity because sitting around the table just saying whatever you want and being allowed to do whatever you want doesn't work so well.
Now, I think the problem that I see with that is that when you play D&D, because none of the role-playing is part of the system at all, it is very easy to get off track with the role-playing, which can have very profound, if subtle, effects on gameplay. For example, in D&D, because all this stuff is outside of the rules, it doesn't matter, and it's very easy to forget or lose track of things that you set up in your character. You might have written a little backstory thing, but you might just forget about things your character believes in, or you might forget that your character has a flaw or whatever, because there's no reason to remember it. There's no rule to remember it. And also, because it's outside of it, there's no force other than everyone's willingness and ability to keep the role-playing interesting and on track. And it's really easy for a game to get bogged down in a bunch of characters talking and arguing, or deciding what to do in combat, or doing things that feel like role-playing but are actually just procedural.
Yes, the thing is when you take the role-playing out of the game system itself, then you sort of run out of ways to encourage the role-playing and to make the role-playing matter. It becomes, it's out of the system, which I guess doesn't really matter. You still have the ability to role-play, but now you don't have the mechanism to integrate the role-playing with the things that happen.
Yes, and thus
all you can really do, the best you can do in Dungeons & Dragons is if the DM gives XP to people who role-play, or recognize who role-plays, and then, completely separately from that, gives them more treasure. But if you do stuff like that, you don't make that connection with my role-playing got me that. You need the direct connection.
Yep.
Like, you act something, and then directly what the thing you did results in the good stuff, as opposed to, separate non-associative rewards.
So as a result, it's very difficult to keep everyone on track role-playing in character, and to play D&D with good role-playing takes a lot of discipline among everyone involved, both the DM and the players. And that amount of discipline can often be stifling or difficult to maintain over many hours.
Yep. And while it is possible for, I'm sure plenty of people role-play awesomely with the D20 system all over the world, you could, and I have seen systems, Burning Wheel, where you can get people who are not experienced role players to role play awesomely because the system is designed in such a better way.
When we played these Burning Wheel games with Luke Crane at UberCon, and we played in several, he there are people who have never roleplayed before who will sit down at this and not know what to expect. And they'll, within a half hour, be role-playing better than a lot of people who have played D&D for much of their lives. And they'll be fully into it, and they'll grasp everything, and they'll be playing their character. And in D&D, you don't see that because well, not often. I mean, we brought some people who haven't played a lot of D&D into our current game, and luckily, well, it's not really a good example because we've been using a lot of Burning Wheel mechanics in our D&D game.
Yep.
We've slowly been turning D&D into Burning Wheel. But in normal cases, someone who hasn't played D&D before gets so bogged down in the rules and the procedure of play that it's very easy to lose track of actually role-playing because you're too busy trying to figure out whether you have a plus 15 or a plus 16 in your diplomacy check.
Now, let's actually talk about some of the specific mechanics in D&D that I think really hinder it.
All right, I got a big one I'm going to save till the end.
You're going to talk about combat takes forever?
Oh, no. The one at the end, I want to talk about reward and failure and that sort of thing.
I want to talk about that, too.
All right, well, we'll talk about that.
All right, so the first thing that's obviously wrong with D&D is that if you look in the rule book, the vast majority of the rules deal with one thing and one thing alone, and that is fighting. Combat between characters, between you and monsters mostly, but fighting in general.
Now, I liked combat a lot more in second ed than I do in third ed, despite the fact that the system of combat in third ed is very well put together and is a wonderful combat system. It takes care of everything. You can have fairly large battles that are very interesting and somewhat tactical in third ed D&D.
And there are a lot of interesting options open to you, even if you don't have magics. But
However,
if you do have magics, it's even more interesting.
However, in second ed, because the system was so limited in scope and kind of broken, you ended up being very creative in combat, and combat tended not to take as long, and it was much more abstract.
Regardless, in both D&D systems, combat does take too long.
I think it takes twice as long in third ed as it did in second ed.
That means it takes a half hour in second ed and an hour in third ed.
Well, part of it is that second ed the combat in second edition D&D was designed so that you can play with miniatures, but it is not necessary. It can be abstracted very easily to where you choose who you're attacking with just a general sense of who's where in the room or what's going on and who you can target with spells. And as a result, you can kind of imagine and just roleplay with it and roll with it a lot easier. In third ed, you have to worry about, all right, if I walk 15 feet to the right and then I cast Magic Missile.
Even so, the emphasis on combat in all Dungeons & Dragons is, and in fact most other role-playing games like the GURPSes and all the White Wolves and things, is way too much. I mean, think about it. You're role-playing, okay? So there's some sort of world, and you're a character with some sort of goals. And unless you're a boxer, or perhaps in an army...
Oh, you mean like a fighter?
Yes. Or unless you're in an army that is at war. Even if you're in an army at war, in a fantasy setting, how often are there actually battles? But when you play D&D, it's just constant battles all over the place.
Yeah, you gotta have a fight in every game or people get restless because... And I hate that. And luckily, we've shied away from that. But even our really good games we played in college, every session, there was at least one fight. Because otherwise, at the end of the session, while you might have a good role-playing session, you'd feel like you wasted having this character because almost everything on your character sheet is for combat and combat alone.
Yeah, it's like, even if you try to make the least combat character in D&D, you end up making an ineffective character. Like, let's say you're role-playing, right? You have some sort of role-playing goal that is outside of beating people up or winning a war or fighting monsters or getting treasure, right? So you make a D&D character with many non-combat skills and abilities and stuff like that, of what there are available. If you do that, you're going to make a largely ineffective character who is not going to be able to physically achieve their goals according to the rules because someone else who made a character for combat will be much more powerful within the system, and they will stop you.
I mean, I tried it once. I tried to make a pacifist scholar, and I put all my points into knowledge, skills, and all these things. And thus, whenever the party got into combat, everyone took part except me, who just kind of fell asleep and didn't bother because there's nothing I could do. And outside of combat, while I could roleplay, most of my interaction with the game in terms of my character was the party, oh, well, what do we know about X? Rim rolls a d20 based on his knowledge skill. Oh, Rim knows X. The DM reads what Rim knows. Play continues. It made it unfun to play the character, and it just wasn't worth it. If your character can't engage in combat in standard D&D, your character is often very difficult to play effectively.
At least within that system.
Yeah. Now, this, because we've already gone a little long, this is the thing that really rankles me about D&D in most systems. And it really plays into what Scott just brought up about the combat, and the combat taking forever, and the combat being the focus.
Yep.
D&D rewards success and punishes failure, and that is it.
Well, it doesn't really punish failure.
Well, you die.
I guess, yes, but the thing...
Or you don't get XP.
The thing in D&D is, look, even not the D20 system, but previous systems, right? You're rolling this 20-sided dice, right? And some numbers are failure and some are success. But in general, you always have a 5% chance of guaranteed success and a 5% chance of failure. And usually, success means you got what you wanted and what you expected. The monster died, you were able to jump over the cliff, you were able to climb up the wall, whatever. Failure in D&D basically means either you died or
you, at most, you don't progress the plot. You don't progress the role-playing or the story or anything.
The game just stops until you can find another way to succeed by rolling a different number or somewhere else, or you have to go and do something else and a large tree blocks your path.
Yep. Like, oh, we're at a door. We got to get into this room. Pick the lock. I fail. Crap. What do we do now? We have to figure out how to pick this lock.
Well, we bash the door down. We fail. All right. What do we do now?
And that's really the crux of the matter, is that in D&D, if your characters fail at something, that sucks always. And if your characters succeed, that's awesome always. But in a better role-playing system, because in the real world or in a fantasy world or anything, sometimes people fail. And I think that a good role-playing system or a good role-playing session is one whereby you play your character as that person. If they succeed or fail, you still have the same amount of enjoyment.
Yeah, see, you got to remember that in D&D, right, it seems like the character that you are playing is separate from you, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, to have the really good role-playing, you have to make them one and the same. You have to be your character. And you do in some ways. But at the same time, you're playing a game. Any game you're playing, board game, video game, whatever, you should be having fun the whole time. And no matter what happens, right? Even if you're playing a video game and you just can't beat it, it's not good if it's not enjoyable the whole time. And in D&D, when your character succeeds, it's enjoyable. And when your character fails, it is not enjoyable for you, the human being playing Dungeons & Dragons. An ideal role-playing system
Burning Wheel.
Should be fun whether your character succeeds or fails. It should be fun if you die, if your character dies. It should be fun if your character falls off a cliff. It should be fun if your character gets stabbed. It should be fun if your character gets into a fight and gets beat up. It should be fun if your character gets captured by the evil wizard. No matter what happens, it should be fun for the human being pretending to be that character.
Now, to clarify that a little bit, I mean, it should be fun, but what that really means is that, let's take an example from Burning Wheel versus D&D. If in D&D, you get to the door, and you attempt to get through the door by the means you have available, and you fail. Now the game bogs down into a procedural, how to get past the door, or do we avoid the door, or whatever. And anytime it's like you're climbing a ladder. And toward the plot goals, or your character's goals. And anytime you roll well, you go up a rung. And anytime you roll poorly, you're stuck on that rung until you roll well, or do something to make yourself get past it. Mm-hmm. In Burning Wheel, there's no ladder. There's just a sea of possibilities. And if you fail at something, you failed at it. You don't procedurally,
yes.
Well, what if I do this? What if I do this?
The rule is let it ride. If you roll at opening the door and you fail to open the door, you fail to open the door, period.
Myself, Scott, and Pete played a very good short demo of Burning Wheel with Luke once, where it was 3 characters who all have goals, and we all want this one MacGuffin in this place, and we're arguing over it and whatever. Scott grabs the MacGuffin and fucking runs away. So Pete and I say, all right, we're in this together. Let's get that little prick. So Scott tries to escape, and we try to get away. Now, in D&D, this would go on forever. Scott runs away. We chase him. Chase him. There's rules for chasing. If we catch him, all right, now maybe I can get away this other way. Maybe I can get away this other way. In Burning Wheel, the way we resolved that was we did the thing. We rolled the dice. Will Scott be able to get away or not? There is no procedural bullshit. It's just, will the plot go in direction Scott escapes or direction Scott does not? Scott rolled, and it ended up that he was not able to escape. What that meant was that plot point was done. It was settled. Scott did not escape from us. We are going to catch him. Now we can skip the procedural bullshit and get on to the role-playing of the real situation that's interesting.
Yeah, so now we move directly to Scott is caught. They have caught up to Scott. Now what do you do?
And it's this idea of, by skipping the procedural crap, it's so much easier to get into character because you don't have to worry about the meta. You don't have to worry about, but what if my character dies? You just look at your character. This is what my character wants, and this is what he's willing to risk. I am also willing to risk that. Let's go.
And as you play the game never stalls. No matter what you do, the game is always moving forward. Who knows where it's moving forward? I don't know. It could be going left, right, up, down. Who knows?
You skip the boring parts and get to the dramatic
Yes,
parts.
the game always moves forward towards wherever it's going. And in D&D, the game a lot of times stops. I mean, it stops when you have a combat that might in-game take 5 minutes of time. You spent like 2 hours moving miniatures around and rolling 1 billion dice.
Yep, and playing all this meta game, because combat in D&D is so meta, it's a tactical miniatures game. And you can't think in terms of what your character is thinking, because you have to think in terms of 5-foot steps and attacks of opportunity. In Burning Wheel and a lot of other good systems, like Burning Wheel in particular, the combat, while it can be very complex, it is still from the perspective of the character as opposed to from the perspective of the player. You're not manipulating the 5-foot steps and doing the rules and figuring out if my fireball will be able to engulf all the goblins but not engulf Scott. You say, all right, I try to stab him because he's in front of me. I try to hold back. I try to feint. It's all from the perspective of the character. It's like a first-person view instead of a third-person view. It's really hard to explain what I mean by that, but I hope you get the point.
You can just buy the book and find out.
Yeah, you can get into the character's head in combat and in role-playing. In D&D, it's very hard to stay in the character's head and still do the combat, especially since the combat takes an hour to resolve what takes a minute of game.
Yep. So in the end, D&D is a tabletop role-playing system, and it is possible to have excellent role-playing while using
Yes,
the
don't
D&D
come to us and
system.
say, but we play D&D well. It is possible, but
Yes, but D&D is not conducive to role-playing. It is not a catalyst of awesome role-playing. It is, in fact, the opposite of a catalyst.
Don't
What's the
pretend-
opposite of a catalyst?
an anti-catalyst,
Okay.
a hindrance.
Yeah.
D&D does not assist your role-playing in any real, tangible way. D&D can be played well and with good role-playing, but it takes so much discipline, and you can't pretend that it's easy to maintain good role-playing throughout an entire game or campaign of D&D.
It's not. I can't do it. But yeah, if you're looking for, D&D does also have the advantage that it's available everywhere and easily accessible, whereas pretty much every other RPG is much harder to find, requiring a game store or worse, or the internet or something, in order to get the books even. But regardless, D&D as a system for tabletop role-playing, like you're trying to play roles and act and such, is not so great. And other things like Burning Wheel and even Inspectors and Primetime Adventures and
All those other things.
all those other games.
Listen to the Luke Crane interview. He talks
Yes.
about every game you should play.
They are much better at it. They are conducive to role-playing and are not like D&D.
So why do we play D&D? Personally, the only reason is that it is the lowest common denominator. Everyone knows how to play D&D, or at least enough to where you've got the critical mass to just go with it and not worry about teaching someone a new system. But we're working very hard to eventually drop D&D entirely and just use Burning Wheel or a similar system.
Yeah. And also, we are starting with people who have already been playing D&D for years. We're already D&D geeks, and we already own the books, so it's very cheap for everyone to play it. If we wanted to play something else, basically, it would be easy if we had one person who already knew something else and could teach it to us, but we're all sort of learning it together, and it's quite difficult, especially on a once-a-month basis, to learn a new system, because learning any role-playing system, even a tiny one, is not as simple as like learning a board game where you just learn the rules and then you follow the instructions.
Yep.
It's a whole big learning experience, and it's a lot of work and it takes time. But if you haven't learned any systems already, you might as
Skip
well
on
learn a good
D&D.
one. Yeah.
Go right to Burning Wheel. It seems complicated. Just go with it. See, the question in this show that we're just concluding right now was, what's wrong with D&D? And I think the answer Scott and I just came to was, it's not Burning Wheel.
Yeah, I started out the episode not wanting to mention Burning Wheel so much and just keep mentioning what's wrong with D&D, but it's kind of hard once you've seen the Burning Wheel and experienced it to get away from it.
Yeah, and it's not just Burning Wheel. It's just that Burning Wheel was the first system we ran into that solved all the problems that we hadn't even realized were problems in D&D for the most part. I mean, all the problems I thought were with 3rd Ed that 2nd Ed did okay, I was just stupid.
Yeah, I'm sure there are plenty of other awesome systems out there that are akin to Burning Wheel, and if I experienced them, I would say, oh, this is just as amazing.
I think part of it was the sheer force of Luke Crane's personality.
Yes, that, and the fact that I do think that Burning Wheel is the biggest of these role-playing systems. It's sort of like, D&D, GURPS, and all those big ones, and then on the top of the indie pile is like Burning Wheel. It's like the king of the indie RPGs, and there's a reason it's the king of the indie RPGs.
So, in this case, we don't say anything like this often, but there's going to be a forum thread about this show, like there always is, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about D&D and whether or not you agree with us. I want to hear about your experiences.
Well, we want that for every episode.
Yeah, but I want this particularly for this one, because I'd like anyone to just tell us what you think about D&D.
Oh, that reminds me. Anyone who joined the forum.
All right,
yes,
right.
If you join the forum, the way our forum works, you don't just join and then immediately you're in. I have to click approve. And usually I click approve within like 10 minutes of you registering.
Yes,
if not like the next morning, if maybe you apply while I'm asleep.
We have only once ever denied someone entrance to the forum.
Right. So the thing is if you use Hotmail, when I approve you, you're not going to get the email that says you were approved because Hotmail sucks. And you should probably switch to Gmail. But if you registered for the forums and you did not get an email that said, congratulations, you have been approved, guess what? Congratulations, you have been approved. Come back to the forums and sign in with whatever username and password you picked.
And also,
if you can't remember your username and password, or if you're not sure, you can just email geeknights@frontrowcrew.com and I'll take care of you.
And also, just a fair warning, because a lot of people have been joining the forums lately. We do have moderators. And
moderator.
Well, we're getting more moderators because he's a little bit overtaxed now with all you newbies. But at least relatively adequate spelling and grammar are enforced. You'll see when you go to our forums. Our forums are not like the rest of the internet, and we take pride in that.
Yes. So if you start, spelling things wrong and not using there correctly, and if you don't have commas,
you
and
gonna get
periods
banned
and capitals, that's not good. You need those things.
Yeah, you can go over to the Penny Arcade forums or 4chan if you want to talk like that. We're trying to make an ivory tower, and we're trying to be elitist assholes here, so go with it.
Or get out.
This has been Geek Nights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geek Nights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via audio. Just click the link that says send me an audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.